Alright guys, welcome back to Frankbrox Art. We are drawing Galactus. I finally finished it. I added to the rest of the image or whatever. I'm probably put that up this weekend or whatever. But Galactus is done. Let's freaking go! Alright guys, today we're going big. I mean really big. The one and only Galactus, the devourer of worlds. 15 minutes of cosmic chaos sped up for you, but it took me a good while to make me feel as if this is as massive as everyone deserves. So I wanted to capture that feeling that this dude doesn't just exist in space, it owns it. So grab your snacks, grab your sketchbook, and let's dive into the universe, Frankbrox style. Every Galactus piece starts with proportion. He's not just tall, he's cosmic. If his helmet isn't balanced, the whole thing feels off. So I start a little loose, getting the shapes and the symmetry right. But part God, part machine, part mystery, this is what this guy is, and those angles have to show it, you know what I'm saying? Now, usually right here, I start to block, it's kind of like blocking, getting in, kind of making the shapes of it and, start working on the helmet pieces and, the body structure and, just get that rough sketch out the way, lining up the shoulders and all that stuff. So, giving it that kind of bigger, kind of outer, like this guy is like big as a building, trying to give that air of like this guy is freaking eternal. He's huge, so. But a fun fact: Galactus isn't technically evil. He's more like a universal force. He gotta eat just like the same way we need air. He eat these worlds, like we need a sandwich or something like that. Hey, he's trying to feel, get that sustenance, you know what I'm saying? So I wanted to balance his pose, showing, power, but not rage. He's just doing what he does, guy gotta eat, you know what I'm saying? So, now when I'm, sketching someone this huge, I zoom way out often sometimes just to kind of see, in the space of like, of all the characters, make sure everything looks proportionally right, Now, the biggest mistake in Galactus drawings is over detailing, too early, and with this one, I added details, but I didn't really go overboard. I kind of left the structure a little loose, I kind of drew some things in there and just exaggerated some stuff or whatever. I could have went super far in, but I thought like, okay, I don't want to go too crazy. I just want to keep it where you can kind of tell, hey, this is Galactus. So trust me, I've done that. I looked up and I was like, okay, this is a big, huge guy. I wanted him to look right. So I think all that I did, I think I accomplished, at least the intensity and, his structure, the massive size, the coloring and all that stuff. I did it fairly okay. I could have went a little bit above and beyond, but I was like, I want to just finish this thing and, go on to the next drawing. So, boom, this is what you get. Now, in the inking phase, this is where we have some fun. I'm still working on like my digital kind of line work and stuff. It's still kind of like garbage, but when you zoom out, you can't really tell. And then I can go into Illustrator and kind of spruce it up once I, clean up the lines and all that stuff in Illustrator. It'll look better, But now, like I said, the fun part, inking. This is where Galactus really starts to take shape. Now, I'm using thicker lines, because usually on the outer sides of it, I want it to kind of stand out. So I use like a thicker lines for outside, and then I use thinner lines for like the details inside the body. That combo gives him like weight and even in like on a flat image or whatever. So, now you'll notice I'm carving those armor plates like puzzle pieces, each one reflecting light differently. Inking for me is like meditation. Every stroke feels intentional. Now there's a lot of erasing here and there, which breaks my concentration, but I get back into the zen and I start back with my line work, trying to evenly, strategically get in those little line works and, trying to bring all that, intensity out through my line work or whatever. So now the hardest part, keeping with, keeping those lines nice and tight and clean. Sometimes I get a little tired and I get a little vigorous and I just start, just doing some stuff and not really focusing. But, I try to concentrate again, get back in there and start tightening up the work and, fine tuning my lines so that, when I bring it into Illustrator, it doesn't have to work too hard, trying to figure out my line work and, making it smooth and all that stuff. So, the hard part is kind of getting it done right the first time, my inking. Now, by this point, I'm thinking how cosmic light, wraps around him, that faint flow that makes him feel endless, like he's standing in front of a dying sun, kind of. But, I just basically want, to make the guy, a huge force, though he shrunk himself down, I want him to be intimidating in a sense, I wanted to make sure, because as you can see, I have some, poses of myself, and I want to make it where he's kind of, bending down and reaching out and, wanted to get kind of the shadows as good as possible, but I think it turned out pretty good, the line work and everything. So, yeah. Now, when the ink's done, I'll sit back and check out the flow, make sure the eyes move, the eyes and, the helmet and the chest and, his chin, facial features and all that look cool. So everything looked kind of cool. So I was like, okay, on to the next stage. Let's get into some of the coloring. Yes, the favorite of the favorite parts. All right, the coloring and energy, bringing the cosmic force to life. Now, here's where it gets, where this gets, where it's all kind of comes together or whatever. So I start layering purples, the magentas, the cosmic blues. Galactus have this, I would say, classic color scheme, but I like sneaking in like light pink glows, and I was using some gradients there, some deep violets, that make them pop off the screen. My goal with the color isn't realism per se, it's more like energy. He's surrounded by, the galaxy and the structure. Well, not really. It's more so he's inside, he's on the planet Earth. So, he's, surrounded by the buildings and all that stuff, Although it would be cool if he was outer space, but he's here now. He's on the planet. He's going after the Fantastic Four. So they're jumping and hopping and skipping and trying to, he still has his color scheme, and, he's gonna look a little off when he's coming to this world. It's like, who's this blue and purple magenta looking guy? But anyway, I think he looks cool as he's in the scene or whatever. This is a comic, come on, let's be real here, or not real. So around here, I'm kind of brushing in or putting in like, some colors. I didn't do anything super cosmic, crazy, like energy or something coming off of him. I just kind of basically just focused on him and the details on his suit. So, and I love like the hue scale. He's massive, it makes it, the whole, image come to life, make him, it makes it seems as if, hey, this is an emergency, this big, huge guy, reaching for us, and everybody's running off and stuff. So I think the pose, the coloring, having them reach out or, reach for the characters, I think that, really like brought this whole piece to life. The coloring, I added some gradients. The darker colors are more towards like the bottom, so you can get a sense like, hey, the sun direction and light and stuff. I didn't do many reflections or anything like that. I just kind of kept it, generally basic kind of coloring, outside of like the gradients. I wanted to go more detail in the coloring of his face, but I think at that point I kind of got a little tired, and I was like, I just want to finish this thing. So so this is what I got up to this point. Now maybe I may go back and add some more details later, who knows, but as of right now, I think it is what it is. And I think it turned out pretty decent. I'm not gonna hit this horse until it, I'm not going to beat the horse, and, I'm just going to leave it as is and just say, boom, job well done, I guess. And that's it, folks. The Devourer of Worlds is complete. Now, this piece, it is sped up about 15 minutes, but this thing, as you can look at the other videos, this thing took some hours and hours, because sometimes I worked on other projects, came back, try to finish it up or whatever. But for me, Join to Like This, isn't just fan art. It's about scale, control, the idea that every artist has their own universe to feed. Now, if you enjoyed this one, hit that like button, drop a comment on who I should draw next. Maybe Silver Surfer or Dr. Doom, it's kind of popular right now, Maybe I should have added Silver Surfer to this thing, but, hey, maybe next time. And if you're new here, welcome to Frankbrox Art, where turning imaginations into something real is one line at a time. Catch you guys later. Peace out.